Okay, day 2, 4-5 worksheet 2 is what we're focusing on today. 4-5 day 2 is going to be taking our lovely little graphs that we learned about yesterday. And yesterday we did the period, and we did a vertical, and we did the amplitude. Okay? What we did not do is move it horizontally. Today we're going to move it horizontally. What do I mean by that? The very first thing I need your brain to understand is A, B, C, and D. What is A? Amplitude. The amplitude is responsible for 2 things. What are the 2 things the amplitude is responsible for? It's the, no. Yes, it is the stretch and shrink vertically, yes. What else? The pattern. And then also, there's one more thing then. It is going to be how high it is, the distance, which is the stretch or the shrink, which I need many of you to understand the difference between those, yes? B. What does B do to the problem? What is B responsible for to do? What is B responsible for changing?
Horizontal shrink and stretch.
It is responsible for the period, which is going to be the horizontal shrink and stretch. What that means is whenever you compare the number to 2 pi, you're asking yourself, is this speeding up and going faster around the unit circle, or is it slowing down and stretching it out and taking it longer to complete 1 revolution around the unit circle? Yes? Okay? Now, what does C do?
Up and down.
It moves the entire graph vertically up or the entire graph vertically down. Yes? So that leaves letter D to do what to the problem?
Whole thing left and right.
Moving the entire graph left or right. Now, whenever I say we're moving the entire graph left or right, all of our graphs yesterday started at what point?
0.
0. And where did they always end?
Whatever our last thingy was.
What does that thingy represent? Out of all those letters we already talked about.
Circle.
So what did that represent?
1 revolution.
Which changed our period. It changed our period. So we started at 0 yesterday and we ended at our period every single time. Today, we're going to start shifting our graph left and right, and that's what we call a phase shift. And then we are going to be having a different starting point. It will not be 0, and our ending point will not be our period. However, the length between our starting point and our ending point will always be the length of the period. Does everybody understand what I just said? So how do we go about doing this? Okay, your phase shift is what changes your starting point and your ending point on your table. Okay? Now, I would like to make this very clear to you. I should probably put numbers in here. What is happening to this parabola?
Vertical stretch to up 4 and right.
Okay, that's what we know. If I would go ahead and I did give you this one, what's happening to this one?
Stretch to left 3.
Okay, do you remember this whole concept of whenever it's adding or subtracting inside the parentheses?
Yeah.
It's the opposite direction of what you think. Okay, this is a parent function concept. This parent function holds true across all of our parent functions. Guess what trig is?
Parent function.
It's another parent function. So all of that philosophy is still going to ring true. So whenever we come over here, what your brain needs to understand is it is just a phase shift, and that is going to be D divided by B. Your phase shift is going to be D divided by B. Now, I need your brain to understand something. We have parentheses here. On your homework tonight, if you see parentheses, you have a B and you have a D. If you see no parentheses, you do not have a D. Does that make sense? You only have a C. That moves it up and down. The D in parentheses is what moves it left and right, just like with these parent functions. So whenever I didn't have parentheses, I was not moving left and right on these, were I? Was I? Sorry, guys. Okay, do we understand the phase shift concept? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so how do we go about this? Now, our starting point, also known as SP for me, is going to be the junk in the parentheses, and you're going to set that bad boy equal to 0 every time. Why 0? Because 0 is where we typically started all of our graphs from, yes? Then, your ending point, aka EP, yes, is going to be typically ending at what number on our unit circle? 2 pi. So now we're going to take the junk in the parentheses and set that equal to 2 pi. When we solve them for x, you are going to have your starting point and your ending point. Now, just like with our legislative branch and in our history and our judicial system, we have checks and balances, yes? Same thing applies here in mathematics. Our period is going to be the distance between my starting point minus my ending point. If you get a starting point and you subtract the ending point and it does not equal our ending period, or I should say our period, then you have messed up. Does that make sense? It should always work out. So we're going to jump right into this. So here's our problem that we're going to be working on today. The very first thing I want your brain to say is, what is A, B, C, D? So what is A? A is going to be 1/2. What is B? 3. What is D?
Pi over 3, negative pi over 3.
We don't care about the sign because the sign tells us what? Directions, right? So it's just pi over 3. And what is 4 representing? C. Okay, with all of that there, our brain needs to now do some math. Amplitude. Amplitude is the absolute value of 1/2, which is going to be 1/2. Okay? Since the problem says it is positive 1/2, what can we deduce from this? Well, on tonight's worksheet, we have vertical. What does that vertical mean?
Shift, up and down.
I want to know, is this a stretch, a shrink, or none?
Shrink.
So why is this thing going to be a shrink?
It is less than 1.
A is greater than 0, less than
Because my a value is a fraction between 0 and 1, so therefore it is a shrink compared to the normal value of 1. So this function, per the amplitude, is going to be a vertical shrink. Okay? Remember whenever I talked about the ocean? This is going to be low tide right now, right? There's barely any waves. Okay? Now, next. The next thing my brain needs to talk about is it needs to say, okay, well, based upon this, what do I know my pattern to be? Well, since my amplitude is positive, it is not changing. There's no reflection like I normally would have for a parent function. So what is the typical pattern for sine?
level
Max,
max.
level, min, level, min.
Very good. Level, max, level, min, level. Yes? So we know this pattern has not flipped because it's not reflected. Our amplitude is positive. Any questions over that?
If it would flip to be level min, level min.
If the amplitude was negative, then our maxes and our mins would flop. Levels would stay the same.
So it'd be level min, level max.
Yep. Okay. All right, so what's the next thing our brain should be thinking of after we get this far?
Period.
Our period. So our period is found by what formula?
2 pi over
2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. Why is it 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b?
Distance.
Because it takes one normal revolution is 2 pi units, and we are changing that by our value of b. So what is our b value in this problem? 3. So our new period is going to be 2 pi over 3. Is this a horizontal stretch, shrink, or none?
3.
Meaning, is 2 pi over 3 less than 2 pi or greater than 2 pi? It's so much less. So therefore, you are going to be shrinking this down, and it's kind of like your heart rate is speeding up, yes? So you're going super fast, and you are completing one revolution very quickly. Does that make sense? Okay? The next thing, what do I want after this? Our interval. Our interval is what helps us to land on our quadrant angles, correct? Our interval helps us to land on our quadrant angles. So how do I come up with that?
Period over 4.
Our period divided by 4. So our period is going to be 2 pi over 3. And when I divide by 4, what am I actually multiplying by?
1/4.
1/4. So what is my period going to, or my interval going to be?
Pi over 6.
Pi over 6. Pi over 6. Does that make sense, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so let's keep going. So the next thing I need, which is what we did yesterday, was max, level, and min, yes? So max, level, and min, what do I do from here? How do I find my level?
0 plus wherever the x. So C.
Plus or minus c, so this is 0 plus 4, so 4 is equal to my level. Do we all understand that, yes or no? Okay, next.
So how do we know when to use plus or minus?
Oh,
Maximum is
the
20.
plus, because this is positive, it's plus. If it be minus, you'd
If you
minus.
really want to think about it, you could do 0 plus C, but then if it's a
Correct.
negative, you gotta flip the sign.
Correct. So it really doesn't matter. I put the plus or minus there depending upon what C's value was. In this problem, C is positive. Does that make sense? Okay, good question. Okay, next. How do I find my maximum value?
4 plus 1 half.
My maximum is going to be my level point plus what?
And
Your amplitude, because it's the distance away from your level that you need to have here. So this is going to be 4 plus a half to give you 4.5 as your max. Now, I'm always going to use decimals rather than fractions in this because fractions are harder to graph for us. Would you agree? Decimals are easier for us to graph on our XY table. Okay, minimum.
4 minus 1 half.
I'm going to take my level minus my amplitude. So that's going to be 4 minus a half, which gives me 3.5. Yes?
Yeah.
Or 3.5, same thing. Yes? Do we all understand that? Okay, so everything I've done so far, nothing is new. Would you agree? This is all review from what we did yesterday. So now let's throw in what we're doing new today. So what we're doing new today is going to be the horizontal shift, which is talking about our letter D. Our letter D is going to be what we're referring to as the phase shift. It's moving left or right how many units? So our phase shift is found by taking our D value and dividing by B. Our D is pi over 3 divided by 3 is going to be pi over 3 times a third to give me pi over 9. Yes, sir.
do we not include the negative, or do we just?
You do not include the
Because
negative.
Then you just move it. You would just move it right that many.
Correct. Because this is going to the right, pi over 9 units, because it's minus on the inside.
Now, would that be our starting point there?
Exactly, and here's why it's going to be your starting point. It's because if we were to take the junk in the middle, which is 3x minus pi over 3, and set that thing equal to 0, because that's our typical place where we start. Now, I do this the same way every time because we don't like fractions. So how do I get rid of the fractions in this problem? Multiply the whole thing by 3, that gives me a 9x minus pi is equal to 0. Add that pi over and divide by 9. And your phase shift is going to be your starting point. Do we understand that? So it's a nice check and balance system for you as well. Now, when you graph these, there are multiple coterminal intervals. Would you agree? I do not want the coterminal angle to pi over 9. I want your graph to start at pi over 9. Do you understand me? Okay? So we're going to have this start at pi over 9, and then where are we going to end this at? Well, we're going to take 3x minus pi over 3, and that's going to be equal to 2 pi. Yes? Because that's our typical ending point. Now, when we do this, I'm still going to get rid of my fractions by multiplying by 3, so that's 9x minus pi is equal to a 6 pi. Now, how do I get rid of that pi? Add it. So I have 9x is equal to 7 pi. How do I get rid of the 9? Divide it. So 7 pi over 9 is going to be my ending point. Now, what is the check and balance system at this point that you should be doing? Very beginning, I said our check and balance system is your period has to equal the absolute value or the distance between my starting point minus my ending point. So that's what we're going to do right here. We're going to check to make sure that what we have done is absolutely accurate. So my period is going to be equal to my starting point minus my ending point. So that is going to be pi over 9 minus 7 pi over 9, which is going to give me negative 6 pi over 9. Which, what is negative 6 pi over 9? Absolute value. So what is that going to give you? 2 pi over 3. Folks, what is my period for this function? My period for this function is 2 pi over 3. That's what we got at the beginning of this problem. So therefore, I know that my starting point of pi over 9 is accurate to my ending point of 7 pi over 9, which means my phase shift is right pi over 9 units. Does that make sense? Okay? So how do I graph this now? Because I did all of this work, now I got to put it together and graph it, yes?
So instead of starting at 0, you just start at 5.
So we're going to come over here, and the very first x value, which represents my angles, I'm going to put not 0, but pi over 9, which is exactly what Jack just said. Do we understand that, yes or no? Now, I know that we have been using Desmos this entire time this year because it's free and nobody has to buy a graphic calculator then. So I'm going to show you what to do with Desmos on this as well. So we're going to come back over here, and I'm going to enter this in. And you're going to let the fractions be added together for you here in the calculator, or use your graphing calculator if you have one, okay? We are going to use pi as a variable. So we are not going to put pi in our calculation. So that's 1 divided by 9. And then what am I going to add to this? I'm going to add my interval to this. And what is my interval? Pi over 6. But I said we're going to make pi a variable. So what am I adding? 1/6. So I'm going to say 1 divided by 6. And then I'm going to convert that to a fraction. And what's my next angle? 5 pi over 18. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put 5 pi over 18. How do I get to my next value? So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to put 5 divided by 18 plus 1 divided by 6. And convert that to a fraction, and what does that give you? 4 pi over 9. So now I'm going to come back over to Desmos, and I'm going to do 4 pi over 9, or 4 over 9, and I'm going to add to that what? 1 divided by 6, convert that to a fraction, and what is that going to give me? 11 pi over 18. I'm going to do that one more time. What should it be? Nope. It should be your ending point, which is 7 pi over 9, right? So 11 divided by 18, and I'm going to add 1 divided by 6 to that. And I'm going to convert that to a fraction over here again, and that gives me 7 pi over 9. Is that what I should have had? Yes. Absolutely. Okay, do we see that now? Yes or no? Okay, now, what is my pattern supposed to be?
11 min.
Yes? Makes sense. So, now what should my level value be? It is 4, and what is my maximum supposed to be?
4.5.
Okay, we're going to stop right here, and we're going to go back over to Desmos. Because previously, I came over here, and we did it all by hand, didn't we? Which you can still all check by hand, okay? And as you can see over here on the board, I did that by hand. I plugged in my pi over 9, and 3 divided by 9 is 1/3. 1/3 pi times minus 1/3 pi is 0. The sign at 0 is 0. 0 times half is 0, plus 4 is 4. But I know you guys are not going to do that every time, are you? Okay, so let's go over to Desmos, and let's say, all right, I'm going to refresh this because I want this out of my way. When you start Desmos, what is the default setting for your angle mode? Radian mode. So I'm going to type in this, 1/2 sine of 3 times, what's my first angle?
5 min. So 1 minute.
So you have pi divided by 9, and then what am I subtracting from it? Pi divided by 3, and then get out of that parenthesis, and what am I adding to it?
4.
Plus 4. What did it give me?
4.
It gave you a 4. Now I'm going to copy this. You guys can just go and change it, but I want you to see them all. What does my next angle going to give me?
5 pi over 18.
So I'm going to change my pi over 9 to 5 pi over 18, and what does it give me? 4.5. Does that make sense? Now what angle is supposed to give me my minimum? 11 pi over 18, right? So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to paste this again, I'm going to change my pi over 9 to what? 11 pi over 18, because I want to just check that it gives me my 3.5. So now that I know my pattern is right, I go back to 4, I make this 3.5, and I go back to 4 here. Yes? So how do I graph? Okay, tell me, what is my lowest y value?
3.5.
3.5. What is my highest y value?
4.5.
4.5. So I know I do not need any negative values, do I? Make sense? And I'm going to make my scale go by half units. Yes? 1, half, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? Do you see I went by half units? Okay? In addition to that, I now am going to go and say this is 1, 2, 3. Here's 3.5. I need that point. Here's 4, and here's 4.5. Those are my 3 marks I'm going to be utilizing, isn't it? Do you see how I highlighted those so I could strictly look at those? Now, I have to put my angles on my x-axis. So my angles, I'm going to start at pi over 9. I'm starting here, not at 0. Then I'm going to have an equal interval, and that's going to be what number here? And another equal interval, and what is that going to be?
4, 5, 9.
An equal interval, and what is that going to be?
11, 5, 18.
And my last interval is going to be?
7, 5, 9.
These 5 angles are what I will be looking for on the test. You need to make certain that you have them written down on your axes appropriately. Yes? Then you are going to graph this. At pi over 9, what is the height?
4.
4. It is level. At 5 pi over 18, what is my height? A max. Now I'm back to level, and then I'm going to come down here to 3.5, and I'm going to go back to level. And you're going to make a very small curve there. Do we see it? That is what your homework is for this evening. Now, I was very, very, very particular with tonight's homework. Tonight's homework is, I wonder if I updated this. Actually, let's go here. Okay, so when you look at this, I did this exactly the way I put it on your worksheet. Amplitude, vertical. What are the words I want for vertical? Stretch, shrink, or none. When do I have none? When it's 1. Yes? Okay. Pattern, period, horizontal, same exact words as vertical. Interval, level, max, min. Phase shift, starting point, ending point. You have 6 problems. What happens if you don't have any parentheses? I have no D. So if I look at problem 1, what letters do I have in problem 1?
A, B, C.
A, B, and C. There is no phase shift. So you put none under phase shift. Do we all understand that?
And under starting point, ending point.
Correct. Starting point will be 0, and ending point would be what then?
2,
Nope.
1.
Nope.
20.
Your period. Your period. Yes.
Is this all the test is?
The test is very similar to this. The worksheets will set you up right for the test.
So it's set up the same way.
I'm sorry?
So it's set up the same way as this worksheet.
Very similar, yes. Now, one more question. I need to repeat what I just said because I had confusion there. Okay? When you don't have a horizontal shift, because you are not starting at any place but 0, there's no D. When there's no D, your phase shift, there is none. So you would write none. So my starting point will be what? 0, and my ending point would be what? Your period. Right? Because you have to start at 0, and then you're going to end at your period, and you're going to put your interval in between. Any questions on what my expectations are? Now, listen very closely. 4-5 is tonight's homework, 4-5 worksheet 2. On Monday, you're going to have 4-5 worksheet 3. Okay? Any questions over that? Yes?
On the charts, so we don't have to like work this on paper, we can just use Desmond's checking.
You can put that you use Desmos. I do want you to make sure you check the first 2, and I want you to check a level, a max, and a min.
But we just want to like.
You don't have to do it by hand if you don't want to. Okay?
All of us in here that are juniors.
We're going to talk about that in a moment. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, perfect.